The rain was coming down in sheets, plastering her expensive silk dress to her body. She shivered, but not from the cold. Her hair, once a cascade of perfect blonde curls, was a matted mess plastered to her cheeks. She was pounding on the splintered wood of my front door, the sound echoing like a drum in the silent night. The woman who stood on my doorstep was not the sister who had looked down on me just 3 days ago. Her eyes were no longer filled with a cold contempt, but with a raw, ugly desperation that made my stomach clench. "Neoma, please," she wailed, her voice cracking. "You have to help me. I have nothing left." My hand was on the doorknob, and for a moment, I considered locking it, turning my back on the sister who had stolen everything from me. But the look in her eyes, the complete collapse of her world, stopped me. This was the same woman who had laughed in my face when she had me thrown out of the only home I had ever known. Now, she was begging for my cottage. "Before I begin this story, can you tell me where in the world you're listening to from?" It had all started with the smell of damp earth and old books. The cottage was my inheritance, the only thing my father Cal had left behind. It was small, a little rickety, and sat on a patch of land that smelled of pine and damp leaves. I spent my days patching the roof, pulling weeds from the garden, and trying to forget that I was alone in the world. My sister Maribel lived a few miles away in an apartment that was too small for her ambition, but she was always too busy for the cottage. She was the polished one, the one with big dreams. We were two different people, a difference that had been cemented by our father's death. He had not left us any money to speak of, just a modest life insurance policy that barely covered the funeral. The cottage, he said, was for me. Maribel had always thought it was a joke. A few weeks ago I had patched the roof with some old shingles and was standing on the ladder, exhausted, when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer it. The caller ID was Maribel. Her voice was a strange mix of disbelief and giddiness. "Neoma, you won't believe it," she said, her voice a pitch higher than usual. "Our great-aunt, you know, the one from the pictures, left a trust for her living relatives. And she had no other living relatives, Neoma. It's all ours. It's a fortune." I gripped the phone, the metal ladder cold beneath my shaking hands. It was the moment our two different worlds began to collide, the moment the gap between us would either be bridged or torn open forever. I tried to be happy for her. I really did. I put on a brave face, listened to her ramble about the lawyers and the paperwork, and pretended that the number she kept repeating wasn't making my own little world feel even smaller. $39 million. It was a number that felt made up, a figure from a movie. I was still trying to figure out how to pay for a new water heater, and Maribel was talking about hiring a financial advisor. I felt a prickle of something ugly in my chest, a twisting sensation that I quickly tried to squash. It was jealousy, pure and simple. I had spent my entire life trying to be the supportive little sister, the one who didn't ask for much, who was content with what she had. Now I was struggling to put that mask on. Maribel was always the lucky one, the one who got the A without studying, the one who found the $20 bill on the sidewalk. But this wasn't $20. This was a life-altering amount of money. The conversation went on for another hour, Maribel talking about what she was going to buy first. A new car, a new wardrobe, and then the words slipped out, the words that would come to haunt me. "And you know, Neoma, now that I have this, you can stop worrying about that dump of a cottage. I'll take care of you. We can do this together." The words were meant to be reassuring, but they felt like a tiny cut. The cottage was my home. It was where my father had lived and died. It wasn't a dump, but I didn't say anything. I just let her talk, the sound of her voice a distant hum in my ear, as I stared out at the overgrown lawn, the peeling paint on the window frame, the life I was fighting to hold on to. I should have told her that it wasn't just a house. It was a sanctuary. It was the last piece of him I had, but I was afraid of her. Not in a physical sense, but in a way that's much more insidious. I was afraid of her ambition, her drive, her willingness to bulldoze anything in her path to get what she wanted. I had seen her do it before, but this time, it felt different. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and texts from Maribel, all about her new life. She had hired a personal assistant, a man named Lyle, who was supposed to manage her schedule. He was a slick-talking former lawyer who had a way of making everything sound like an incredible business opportunity. She started talking to me about stocks and bonds, things I knew nothing about. She kept mentioning the need for liquid capital and assets. I didn't understand what she meant. I just wanted to know if she was okay. She didn't seem to be. She was manic, flying from one place to another, trying to spend the money as fast as she could. I tried to tell her to slow down, to think, but she wouldn't listen. She just laughed. She said I didn't understand what it was like to have this kind of money, and she was right. I didn't. I was beginning to feel like I was talking to a stranger. The Maribel I knew, the one who would show up on my doorstep with a six-pack and a bad movie, was gone. In her place was this new person, this glamorous and arrogant creature who talked about nothing but money and power. I knew she was my sister, but I couldn't see her anymore. I was losing her, and I didn't know how to get her back. I couldn't understand how this inheritance, which was supposed to be a gift, had become a wall between us. I had a terrible feeling in my gut that this was just the beginning, that the distance between us was only going to get wider, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. And I was right. I was terribly, horribly right. The real devastation was coming, and it would change our relationship forever. I just didn't know how much worse it could get. I could never have imagined how much she would take. Maribel had always been a fast talker, a force of nature who made things happen, but with $39 million, she became a cyclone. The first thing she did was buy a mansion, not a large house, but a mansion. It sat on a hill overlooking the city, a sprawling fortress of marble and glass. The garage had room for 6 cars, and she bought 3 in one day. I watched it all from the sidelines, still living in the cottage, the chasm between our lives growing wider by the minute. She'd call, her voice echoing with an unnatural cheerfulness, to tell me about her new furniture, her new clothes, her new friends. They were people with names like Cassidy and Lowell, people who had never known what it was like to count pennies. They seemed to exist in a world where everything was effortless and shiny. I would sit on my creaking porch swing, the wood groaning under my weight, and listen to her stories. It felt like she was narrating a movie I was watching, a movie about a stranger who looked a lot like my sister. She invited me to a housewarming party. I almost didn't go. I didn't have anything to wear that wouldn't look completely out of place next to Cassidy's designer gown, but I had to see it for myself. The mansion was even more breathtaking in person. A winding driveway led to a fountain that spouted water high into the air. Inside, the floors were so polished I could see my own reflection in them. The air smelled of money and clean burning candles. I found Maribel by the pool, laughing with a group of people I didn't know. She was wearing a diamond necklace that glittered under the moonlight. She saw me and her smile faltered for a moment, just a fraction of a second, before she plastered it back on. She pulled me into a hug that felt stiff and rehearsed. "Naoma, I'm so glad you came," she said, her voice a little too loud. "Come on, let me introduce you to everyone." She grabbed my arm and dragged me toward her new friends, and I felt a sense of panic rising in my chest. I didn't want to meet them. I just wanted to talk to her, to the old her. I spent the next hour feeling like a ghost, wandering through rooms filled with people who ignored me, people who saw me as an accessory to their glamorous new friend. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't my sister's world. It was a prison she had built for herself, a gilded cage she had trapped herself inside. I finally found her alone for a moment, and I tried to talk to her. I tried to tell her that I missed her. "Maribel," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "this isn't you. You used to hate this kind of thing." She looked at me, a blank expression on her face. "What are you talking about, Naoma? This is what I was always meant to be. You're just jealous. You're just sad that you're stuck in that little shack while I'm living the life we always dreamed of." She was talking about her life, not ours. She had already rewritten our shared history. The pain was sharp, a sting that went all the way to my core. I felt the familiar weight of our grief for our father settle on my shoulders. I felt it so deeply because I knew this wasn't what he would have wanted for us. This wasn't what he had taught us. I left the party soon after, the sound of laughter and music trailing after me as I walked out into the cold night. I got in my old car, the engine rattling to life with a familiar grumble, and drove back to the cottage. The road was dark and empty, a stark contrast to the bright lights of the mansion I had just left. When I got home, I opened the door and the smell of old wood and pine filled my lungs. It was a familiar, comforting smell, a smell that felt like home. I sat down on the floor, the floorboards cold against my skin, and let the tears come. I cried for my sister, for the girl she used to be, for the woman she was becoming. I cried for my father, for the loss of him, for the loss of the future we were supposed to have together. I cried because I knew that this was just the beginning. I had no idea how much more I would have to lose. The pain of her words, of her new reality, was nothing compared to the pain that was coming. The pain of a betrayal that would leave me with nothing at all. The distance between us became a physical thing, a growing canyon of resentment and miscommunication. Maribel called less and less. When she did, the conversations were short and strained. She would talk about the new businesses she was starting, the investment opportunities Lyle was bringing to her. I tried to understand, but the words were a foreign language to me. I was worried and I told her so. Maribel, I said one day, my voice full of an anxiety I couldn't hide. You're moving too fast. Do you even know what you're getting into? Her laugh was sharp, brittle. Naoma, don't be ridiculous. This isn't like some little game of checkers. This is a chance to build something real. You just don't get it. You're too small-minded to see the big picture. The words stung. I wasn't small-minded. I was careful. I was responsible. I was trying to live a life without a safety net, something she had never had to do. I was trying to hold on to the memory of our father, the memory of the lessons he had taught us. He had always told us to be careful, to be grateful for what we had. Maribel was throwing all of that away as if his memory meant nothing to her anymore. I tried to appeal to her sense of family, to the bond we had always shared. What about Dad? I asked, my voice trembling. This isn't what he would have wanted for you. He would want you to be safe. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I thought I had gotten through to her, that I had finally broken through the wall she had built around herself. But when she spoke again, her voice was cold, a glacial calm that was more terrifying than her previous anger. Don't you dare bring him into this, Naoma. He left you that broken-down cottage. He didn't leave us anything real. He didn't leave me anything. I'm doing this on my own. The lie was so big, so monstrous, that it took my breath away. He had left her, left us, the life insurance policy that had covered his funeral. He had left her with a partner, with me. The anger that boiled up inside me was so hot it was a physical thing. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much she had changed, how little she cared for anything but herself. But I knew it was no use. She wouldn't hear me. She couldn't. The conversation ended with a click. She had hung up. I sat there, the phone heavy in my hand, staring at the empty space on the wall where a picture of us and our dad used to hang. It was a picture of the three of us on the porch of the cottage, all of us smiling, so full of hope and a shared love. I had taken the picture down a few days after she had gotten the money. I couldn't stand to look at it anymore. I felt like a fool for even trying to get through to her. She wasn't my sister anymore. She was a stranger with her face, her voice, her memories. She was a ghost. I tried to go back to my life, to the peeling paint and the creaking floors. But the cottage no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a cage. The betrayal was no longer just an emotion. It was a feeling that followed me everywhere, a weight that settled on my shoulders, a constant reminder of how alone I truly was. My friend Jareth called me a few days later. He had heard about Maribel's inheritance, and he was worried about me. He knew how much I was struggling. He had been a close family friend for years, and he had seen the way Maribel had always treated me. Naoma, he said, his voice soft. Are you okay? I heard about Maribel. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. I couldn't lie to him. I told him everything. I told him about the mansion, about the new friends, about the way she had talked to me. He listened patiently, and when I was done, he told me something that made me feel a little less alone. He told me that she was just acting out, that she was scared, that the money was too much for her to handle. I wanted to believe him, but deep down, I knew it was something else. It was greed. It was a deep, dark emptiness inside her that no amount of money could ever fill. I didn't know how right I was, but I was about to find out in the most painful way imaginable. The knock on my door was a surprise. I hadn't seen Maribel in person since the housewarming party, and I was not prepared for her sudden appearance. She was smiling, but it was a different kind of smile than before, not the manic, ghoulish grin of a woman gone mad with power, but a softer, more genuine expression. She was wearing a simple dress, no jewelry, and she looked more like the Maribel I had grown up with. "Naoma," she said, her voice a low murmur, "can I come in? I need to talk to you." I hesitated for a moment, but the look on her face was so earnest, so filled with a sense of regret, that I couldn't say no. I let her in, and we sat on the porch swing. It creaked under her weight, a familiar comforting sound that filled the silence between us. She took a deep breath. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm so sorry. I've been so awful to you. The money, it's just been too much." My heart ached for her. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that the girl I had known was still in there somewhere, buried under a pile of designer clothes and expensive cars. I wanted my sister back. She told me about a new venture she was starting. It was a company that would build affordable housing, a way to use her money to help people, to make a difference in the world. She talked about it with a passion I hadn't seen in her since our father had died. It was the kind of thing she had always wanted to do, to help people, to give back. And she wanted me to be a part of it. "Neoma," she said, her eyes shining with tears, "I want to do this with you. I can't do this alone. I need you. I need you to be my partner." It sounded so real, so genuine. She told me she had a lawyer and a business plan. She just needed a piece of collateral, something to secure the loan, a way to show the banks she was serious. "It's just a formality," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "We just need to use the cottage as collateral for the loan. We'll get it back as soon as the company is off the ground. It's just a piece of paper. It's for us." I was so moved by her words that I didn't stop to think. I didn't stop to think about the fact that she had $39 million and I had nothing. I didn't stop to think about the fact that she didn't need the cottage for anything. I just wanted to believe that she was back, that the old Maribel was back. I wanted to believe that she wanted to do something good, something that would honor our father's memory, something that would bring us back together. She pulled a sheaf of papers out of her bag. They were filled with legal jargon, with numbers and clauses that I didn't understand. I tried to read them, but she just laughed. "It's just a formality, Neoma. It's nothing. Just sign here, and we can get started." I looked at her earnest face, at the tears in her eyes, and I made the worst mistake of my life. I signed the papers. I signed the deed to the cottage, the only thing I had in the world. I signed it over to her, believing that it was the first step to a new life, a new beginning, a new future for both of us. When I was done, she hugged me, a long, tight embrace that made me feel like I was a little girl again, safe in her arms. "Thank you, Neoma," she whispered in my ear. "Thank you. I promise you won't regret this." I believed her. I really did. She left soon after, a light step in her walk. The cottage felt a little brighter, a little less lonely. The promise of a new future, of a shared future, filled me with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since my father had died. I spent the rest of the day planning, dreaming of the things we would do together, the way we would help people, the way we would honor our father's memory. I was so caught up in the fantasy that I didn't see the truth right in front of me. I didn't see the tiny imperceptible shift in her smile, the way her eyes lingered on the deed, a glimmer of something cold and calculating in them. It wasn't about building something together. It was about taking the last thing I had, the thing she had always despised. The silence that followed her departure wasn't peaceful. It was a suffocating quiet, the kind that precedes a storm. I just didn't know how violent the storm would be. I had just signed my life away to the very person I was trying to save. A week passed and I heard nothing. The initial excitement of our new venture had faded into a gnawing silence. I called Maribel, my phone ringing unanswered. I texted her, but there was no reply. I tried to tell myself she was busy, that she was caught up in the whirlwind of her new life, but a sick feeling was growing in my stomach. I called Jareth and he told me not to worry. "She's just trying to get all her ducks in a row," he said. "You know how she is. She gets focused on something and doesn't pay attention to anything else." But this felt different. This felt intentional. The silence felt like a punishment. I started to have a terrible feeling that I had made a huge mistake. I thought about the papers I had signed, about the legal jargon I didn't understand. I tried to remember what they said, but it was all a blur. I just remembered her face, the tears in her eyes, the earnestness in her voice. I had trusted her. I had trusted my sister. The anxiety became unbearable. I had to see her. I had to know what was going on. I drove to the mansion, my car sputtering and groaning on the winding driveway. The security gates were closed, a metal barrier that separated me from her world. I pressed the intercom button, my heart pounding in my chest. A voice, cold and disembodied, answered, "State your business." I told him I was Maribel's sister, that I was there to see her. "I'm sorry," the voice said, "Miss Maribel has no appointments today. You will have to schedule an appointment through her personal assistant." I begged him to let me in, to just tell her I was there. "I'm sorry," he repeated. "I cannot do that." The gates remained closed. The metal barrier, the voice, the empty driveway, it was all a symbol of the wall she had built between us. She had not only taken the cottage, she had taken away my access to her. I was locked out. I was no longer her sister. I was a stranger. I drove home in a daze, the world around me a blur of color and sound. The trees, the houses, the street signs, they all looked the same, a uniform landscape of my despair. When I got back to the cottage, I felt a wave of nausea. The house, which had once been a source of comfort, now felt like a prison. The peeling paint, the creaking floors, the smell of damp earth, it all seemed to mock me. I had given it all away for nothing. I had given it all away for a lie. I felt a sense of rage building inside me, a hot, angry fire that threatened to consume me. How could she have done this to me? How could she have betrayed me so completely? I had always been there for her. I had always loved her, and she had taken advantage of my trust, of my love, of my hope for a new life. She had taken everything and given me nothing in return. I went inside and sank onto the couch, the worn cushions soft against my skin. I closed my eyes and tried to remember a time when things were simple, when our biggest problem was who got to watch what on television. But the memories were gone, replaced by the image of her face, of her smiling eyes, of her hand on mine. As I signed the papers, I had always been the stronger one, the one who held us together after our father died. But she had broken me. She had shattered me into a million tiny pieces. I felt a sense of hopelessness, a feeling that I would never be able to put myself back together again. The future I had dreamed of, the shared future with my sister, was a lie. It was a mirage she had created to get what she wanted. It was a cruel and painful joke. I didn't know how I was going to get through this, how I was going to survive, but I was about to find out in the most painful way imaginable. The next day the mail came, and with it a piece of paper that would change everything. The mail was a mundane ritual, a small moment of normalcy in my chaotic life. But that day, it was different. I opened the mailbox and found a plain white envelope, its contents feeling heavy and official. There was no return address, just my name and address typed neatly on the front. I tore it open, my hands trembling. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The words were a blur at first, a collection of legal jargon and bureaucratic language, but then a single phrase jumped out at me, a phrase that made the world spin and the floor tilt. "Notice of eviction." My heart stopped. I read the rest of the document, my eyes scanning the words, my brain trying to make sense of them. The cottage was no longer my home. I had 30 days to vacate the premises. The papers I had signed, the investment papers, were not what Maribel had claimed. They were a deed of sale, a legal document that transferred ownership of the cottage from me to her. The betrayal was no longer just an emotion. It was a raw, ugly reality. I sank to my knees on the front porch, the world around me a blur of color and sound. The birds were singing, the sun was shining, but I was in a place of my own making, a place of despair and disbelief. I had been so blind, I had been so foolish. I had let my love for my sister, my hope for a shared future, blind me to the truth. She had not only taken my home, she had taken my trust, my faith, my sense of self. She had reduced me to nothing. I felt a sense of rage so powerful that I thought it might consume me. How could she have done this to me? How could she have looked me in the eye, talked about our father, talked about our shared dreams, and lied to me so completely? She had used my love against me. She had used my hope against me. She had used the very thing that made me human to destroy me. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, the eviction notice a crumpled ball in my hand. The sun was setting, the sky a bruised purple and orange. I was still in the same spot when Jareth pulled up in his car. He saw the look on my face, and he didn't even have to ask what was wrong. He got out of the car and sat down next to me, his arm around my shoulder. "Naoma," he said, his voice soft. "What happened?" I couldn't speak. I just handed him the crumpled paper. He read it, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. "I can't believe she did this," he said, his voice filled with a quiet fury. "I can't believe she would do this to you." The words were a comfort, a small ray of light in the darkness. But they didn't change anything. The cottage was no longer mine. I had nowhere to go. I had nothing. Jareth took me to a local diner, a place with red vinyl booths and a jukebox that played old country songs. We sat in a booth in the back and he bought me a cup of coffee. I drank it in silence, the hot liquid a soothing balm to my raw throat. He talked, but I didn't hear him. I was still replaying the moment I had signed the papers, the look on her face, the way she had promised me that everything would be okay. I had believed her. And now I was paying for that belief. The betrayal was so much worse than I had ever imagined. It wasn't just about the money, or the mansion or the new friends. It was about her willingness to do anything, to hurt anyone, to get what she wanted. I had always thought we were a team, that we were in this together. But I had been wrong. We had never been a team. I had been a pawn in her game. And she had just made her final devastating move. I went back to the cottage that night, but it no longer felt like home. It felt like a monument to my foolishness, a testament to my naivete. I sat on the porch swing, the air cool and damp. I was lost. I had no idea what I was going to do. The world had turned upside down, and I was falling with nothing to hold on to. I couldn't stay here, but I had nowhere to go. I had no money, no home, no family. I was alone in the world, and it was all her fault. But she didn't just want to take my home. She wanted to take my dignity. She wanted to take my spirit. She was about to find out how wrong she was. I was a fighter, a survivor, and I was not going to let her win. I was going to find a way to get my life back no matter what it took. The next morning, the anger had hardened into a cold, unbreakable resolve. I couldn't just let her get away with this. I had to confront her. I had to look her in the eye and make her see what she had done. I got in my car and drove to the mansion, the engine rumbling with a low, angry vibration. I didn't press the intercom this time. I parked the car and walked straight to the front gate. The same voice, cold and disembodied, told me to leave. I ignored him. I rattled the gate with a fury I didn't know I had. I screamed her name, my voice hoarse and raw. "Maribel, get out here. I know what you did." The gate remained locked. I just stood there screaming, until the security guard came out and told me to leave. I didn't. I stood there yelling her name, until she finally emerged from the house, a look of tired irritation on her face. She was wearing a silk robe and her hair was perfectly coiffed. She looked like she had just woken up from a pleasant dream. She looked at me, at my tear-streaked face, at my rumpled clothes, and her lip curled into a sneer. "Naoma, what is your problem? I told you to go through Lyle. You can't just show up here and make a scene." Her voice was like ice. I couldn't believe this was the same person who had sat on my porch swing a few days ago, begging for my trust. "The eviction notice," I said, my voice shaking. "You tricked me. You lied to me. You stole my home." She laughed. The sound was cold and hollow, a sound that made my skin crawl. "Stole your home, Naoma? Don't be so dramatic. That cottage was a liability. It was a money pit. I did you a favor. I saved you from it. You'll thank me one day." The words were a slap in the face. She hadn't just stolen my home. She had stolen my dignity, my pride. She was making me out to be the bad guy, the ungrateful, ungracious little sister. "I'm doing this because I care about you, Naoma," she said, her voice dripping with a false sincerity. "I can't have my sister living in a dump when I'm living like this. It's embarrassing. I'm going to sell it and use the money to set you up somewhere else. I'm even going to give you a little cash to start a new life. It's what our father would have wanted." The lie was so big, so monstrous, that it took my breath away. She was rewriting our entire history, our entire relationship, to fit her narrative. She was making herself out to be the hero, the savior, and I was the one who was standing there, a beggar at her gate, a fool who had given away everything for a lie. The anger that had been simmering inside me boiled over. "You're a monster," I said, my voice a low, angry growl. "You're not my sister. You're a cold, cruel monster who cares about nothing but money. She just laughed again, a sound that was so filled with a deep, dark emptiness that it made me shudder. I'm sorry you feel that way, Neoma, she said, her voice still dripping with that false sincerity. But this is for the best. You'll see. She turned and walked back toward the house, her silk robe billowing out behind her. The security guard, a grim-faced man with a walkie-talkie, stepped in front of me. Time to go, miss, he said, his voice flat. I stood there for a moment longer, watching the door close, a final definitive barrier between us. The truth was so much worse than I could have imagined. She didn't just want to hurt me, she wanted to erase me. She wanted to erase my life, my memories, my past. She wanted to erase the very person I was, but I wasn't going to let her. I was going to fight. I was going to find a way to get my life back no matter what it took. I was going to find a way to make her pay. I just didn't know how. I didn't know how to fight a monster with my bare hands. With nowhere to go, Jareth took me in. His small apartment was a stark contrast to the sprawling mansion I had just left. It smelled of old books and stale coffee, a familiar comforting smell that made me feel a little less lost. I spent the first few days in a daze, just sitting on his couch, staring at the walls, the eviction notice a constant heavy weight in my pocket. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I just replayed the scene at the mansion over and over in my head, her cruel words, her cold laugh. Jareth tried to help. He made me food, he tried to make me laugh, but it was no use. I was broken. I had no idea how I was going to put myself back together again. I had no idea how I was going to move on from this. The betrayal was so much more than just the loss of a home. It was the loss of a sister, the loss of a family, the loss of a past that I had always held so dear. It was the loss of everything. One day, while I was sitting on his couch, my mind a blank slate, Jareth handed me a box. I found this in my closet, he said, his voice soft. Your dad gave it to me a few weeks before he died. He told me to give it to you when you were ready. I think you're ready now. I looked at the box, my hands trembling. It was old, a little worn, and smelled of dust and cardboard. I opened it and found a collection of old photographs, a scrapbook of our family's life. There were pictures of my father and mother, of me and Maribel as little girls, of the cottage, of our birthdays and holidays. I had been so consumed by my grief that I had forgotten what it was like to be happy, what it was like to be a family. I flipped through the pages, a ghost in my own life, and a single page caught my eye. It was a picture of my father, my mother, and a woman I didn't recognize. The woman was smiling, a bright, cheerful expression on her face. Her hand was on my mother's shoulder, a gesture of affection and love. The back of the photo was dated and signed with a name I had never seen before, Odessa. I had never heard of this woman before. I had no idea who she was. I was so confused. Who was this woman? Why was she in a picture with my parents? I looked at the photo again, my mind racing. She was not a distant cousin or a family friend. She was too close, too intimate with my parents. There was a secret here, something my father had been keeping from me, something my mother had been keeping from me. I looked at the picture again, and a small white envelope fell out of the back of the album. It was old and yellowed, and the edges were frayed. I opened it and found a letter, written in my father's familiar, scrawling hand. It was addressed to both me and Maribel. I had no idea what it said, but I knew with a certainty that was both terrifying and exhilarating that it was the key to everything. It was the answer to all my questions. It was the secret to the inheritance. It was the reason Maribel had changed. It was the truth. I held the letter in my hand, my heart pounding in my chest. The letter was a link to my father, to a life I didn't know he had lived. It was a key to a secret he had kept from us, a secret that had led to my sister's betrayal. I wanted to read it, but I was so afraid. I was afraid of what I would find, of what it would say. I was afraid of the truth, but I knew I had to. I had to know what my father had been hiding from me. I had to know what had made my sister do what she did. I had to know what was in the letter. The letter was my only hope. It was my only chance to get my life back, to get the truth. I just didn't know what I would do with the truth once I had it. It was a secret that was about to change everything, a secret that was about to turn my world upside down. The letter was a confession, a testament, and a prophecy all in one. My father, Cal, had written it just weeks before he died. He had a secret, a big one. The woman in the photo, Odessa, wasn't a family friend. She was my mother's sister, a woman she had been estranged from for decades. Odessa had been a brilliant artist, a painter who had traveled the world, sold her work for millions, and lived a life of unimaginable luxury. But she was also a woman who had a habit of making and breaking promises. She had fallen out with my mother over a series of lies and betrayals, but when she found out she was dying, she had tried to make amends. She had come back to the city, to our small town, and she had tried to reconnect with her sister, with our family, but my mother, bitter and angry, had refused to see her. She had been so hurt by Odessa's lies that she couldn't forgive her. My father, however, he had met with Odessa a few times and they had become friends. They had talked about everything, about my mother, about me and Maribel, about their lives and their regrets. Odessa had no children of her own, and she had decided to leave her entire fortune to us, to her nieces, but she wanted to do it in a way that would bring our family back together. She didn't want the money to be a source of conflict. She wanted it to be a source of healing. My father, she said, was the only person who understood this, so she had put the money in a trust that was to be shared equally between me and Maribel. My father, however, had decided to add a clause to the trust. A clause that would protect the money from anyone who would try to take it all for themselves. He had been worried about Maribel's ambition, about her tendency to put her own needs before everyone else's. He had been worried that she would try to take the money for herself and leave me with nothing. He had been right. The trust was contingent on both of us signing the papers, on both of us agreeing to the terms. Maribel, however, had found a loophole, a legal technicality that allowed her to take the money for herself. My father's letter ended with an apology. He was sorry for keeping the secret from us. He had been afraid that the money would cause a rift between us. He had wanted us to get the money after he was gone, after we had had a chance to grieve and to heal. He had wanted us to get it together, as sisters. He had been so wrong. The letter was a confession, a testament to his love for us, and a prophecy. He had been so worried about Maribel, about her ambition, that he had tried to protect me. But he had failed. He had failed to see that the real threat wasn't the money. It was Maribel's greed. It was a greed so powerful that it had consumed her, and it had left me with nothing. The letter was my father's final act of love, his final attempt to protect me. But it had come too late. It had come after I had already given everything away. I sat there, the letter in my hand, the words a raw, painful reality. My sister had not only taken my home, she had taken my inheritance, she had taken my future, she had taken the legacy my father had left for me. The anger that had been a dull ache in my heart was now a raging fire. I was no longer a victim, I was a fighter. I was going to get my life back, and I was going to make her pay. I wasn't going to let her win. She had not only betrayed me, she had betrayed our father's memory, she had betrayed his love. And that was something I could not forgive. I had to do something. I had to find a way to make her see the truth, to make her see what she had done. I just didn't know how. I had a letter, a secret, but she had money, she had lawyers, she had power. I had nothing, but I wasn't going to give up. I wasn't going to let her win. I would find a way. The rage had given way to a quiet, cold determination. The letter in my hand was not just a piece of paper, it was a weapon. It was the truth, and I was going to use it to fight for my life. I called Jareth and told him everything. I told him about the letter, about our great aunt, about the trust, about my father's fears. He listened in silence, and when I was done, he was quiet for a long moment. "Naoma," he said, his voice a low whisper, "she can't get away with this. We have to do something." We spent the next few hours huddled in his small apartment, the letter spread out on the coffee table. We read it again and again, trying to find a way, a loophole, a legal technicality that would allow us to fight her. But there was nothing. The letter was a confession, not a legal document. It was a testament to our father's love, but it was not proof of her wrongdoing. I felt a sense of despair so deep that it was a physical ache. I had nothing. She had everything. I had a letter, a secret, but she had a team of lawyers, she had money, she had power, she had the world. I was a single person fighting against a tidal wave. I felt a wave of hopelessness wash over me, a feeling that I would never be able to get my life back. I was so tired of fighting, so tired of being hurt. I just wanted it all to be over. I just wanted to go home. But I couldn't. The cottage was no longer my home. It was a monument to my foolishness. I felt a new kind of despair, a despair that was so deep that it threatened to consume me. I was alone in the world, and I had no one to help me. I had nowhere to go. But Jareth wouldn't let me give up. He had seen my strength, my resolve, my determination. He had seen the way I had fought for my life, and he wasn't going to let me lose now. Naoma, he said, his voice firm, you're not alone. I'm here. We'll find a way. We have to. He was right. I wasn't alone. I had him. He was a small comfort, a small ray of light in the darkness, but he was enough. We spent the rest of the night talking, planning, brainstorming. We came up with a new plan, a plan that was so crazy, so audacious, that it might just work. We decided to take her to court. We decided to file a lawsuit to fight for the inheritance, to fight for the cottage, to fight for my life. It was a long shot, a crazy idea, but it was the only one we had. It was a plan that was built on hope, on a desperate hope that we could win. The next day, we went to a lawyer, a small, unassuming man with a kind face. We told him everything about the inheritance, about the trust, about the letter, about the betrayal. He listened in silence, and when we were done, he was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the letter, at the photos, at the eviction notice, and he shook his head. It's a long shot, he said, his voice gentle. It's a very long shot. She has a team of lawyers. She has money. You have a letter. It's not a legal document. It's not proof. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. I had known it was a long shot. I had known it was a crazy idea. But hearing it from him, from a professional, made it real. It made it a truth I had to face. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to give up. But then he said something that made me reconsider everything. He said, I'll take the case. The lawsuit was filed, a cold, hard piece of paper that represented my last hope. The lawyer, a man named Johnson, was a bulldog. He was relentless, methodical, and he knew the law. He filed the paperwork. He deposed Maribel. He subpoenaed the bank records, and he went to work. But Maribel's lawyers were a brick wall. They were smart, they were ruthless, and they had unlimited resources. They buried us in paperwork, in legal filings, in motions to dismiss. They tried to break us, to make us give up, to make us go away. They argued that the letter was not a legal document, that it was a piece of fiction, a lie I had concocted to get my sister's money. They argued that I had signed the papers willingly, that I had been a part of the fraud. They tried to turn the whole thing around on me, to make me out to be the bad guy. I was being sued, being charged with slander, with defamation, with fraud. I was being buried. I was drowning. Jareth was there for me every step of the way. He would come to my lawyer's office with me. He would sit with me in the courtrooms. He would listen to me when I was on the verge of giving up. He was my rock, my anchor in the storm. But even he was starting to get tired. We were fighting a losing battle. We were outmanned, outgunned, and out of money. I had to sell my car to pay for the legal fees, and I was living on Jareth's charity. I was a burden, a parasite. I was so tired of fighting, so tired of being hurt. I just wanted it all to be over. I just wanted to go home. The betrayal had not only taken my home, it had taken my spirit. It had taken my will to live. I was a ghost in my own life, a living memory of a person I used to be. The person who had been happy, who had been hopeful, who had been whole. Then one day, Jareth came to me, with an old, dusty shoebox. I was cleaning out my garage, he said, his voice soft. I found this. Your dad gave it to me right before he died. He told me to keep it safe. He said you would know what to do with it. I opened the box, my hands trembling. Inside were a series of old, dusty legal documents. They were life insurance policies, old bank statements, and a series of letters to a financial institution. The documents were dated, and the dates were a few weeks before my father's death. The documents were for a life insurance policy, one that had my name on it. It was for a small, unassuming amount, enough to cover the cost of the cottage. I was so confused. My father had left me the cottage, not the money. Why had he done this? I looked at the documents again, my mind racing. My father had always been a quiet man, a man who kept his secrets close to his chest. But he had not been a fool. He had been smart. He had been careful. He had known what Maribel was capable of. He had known that she would try to take advantage of me. He had known that she would try to take the cottage. The life insurance policy was not a gift. It was a failsafe. It was a secret weapon, a secret that he had kept from everyone, from me, from Maribel, from Jareth. It was a secret that was about to change everything. I looked at the documents again, and a single stunning truth dawned on me. The policy was worth more than the cottage itself. It was worth a small fortune. My father had not left me to the wolves. He had left me a way out. He had left me a way to fight back. With the new evidence, Johnson went to work. He filed a new motion, a motion to compel, a motion to introduce new evidence. He showed the documents to the judge, the life insurance policy, the bank statements, the letters. He told the judge about my father's fears, about his love for me, about his foresight. He told the judge that my father had known Maribel would try to take the cottage. He told the judge that my father had left me the life insurance policy as a way to protect me, as a way to ensure that I would have a future, a life, a home. Maribel's lawyers were a mess. They were flustered, they were angry, they were confused. They had never seen these documents before. They had never known that my father had left me a failsafe. They had never known that I had a weapon, a secret weapon that would change everything. Maribel was deposed again. This time she was a different person. She was no longer the smug, confident woman who had laughed in my face. She was a woman who was terrified, a woman who was on the verge of losing everything. She couldn't explain the documents. She couldn't explain the life insurance policy. She couldn't explain the fact that my father had left me a small fortune. She tried to lie. She tried to say that she knew about it, that she had a right to it. But it was no use. The documents were a testament to my father's love, to his foresight, to his wisdom. They were a testament to the fact that he had not abandoned me. He had not left me to the wolves. He had left me a way out. He had left me a way to fight back. I was no longer the victim. I was a fighter. I was a survivor. I was a woman who was fighting for her life, for her future, for her dignity. I was fighting for my father's memory, for his love, for his legacy. The court date was set. It was a day that would change everything. It was a day that would decide my future, my life, my home. It was a day that would decide the fate of my sister, the woman who had betrayed me, the woman who had stolen everything from me. I was ready. I was ready to face her. I was ready to fight. I was ready to win. The emotional toll of the lawsuit had been immense. I was tired. I was exhausted. I was on the verge of giving up, but I couldn't. I had to keep fighting. I had to keep going. I had to win. The day of the court date, I was a nervous wreck. I sat in the courtroom, my hands shaking, my stomach in knots. I looked at Maribel, at her perfectly coiffed hair, at her designer suit. She looked like a woman who had everything, a woman who was on the verge of winning. But I knew the truth. I knew that she was a monster, a cold, cruel monster, who had taken everything from me. I had to show the judge the truth. I had to show him what she had done. I had to show him what she was capable of. The trial began, and I was on the stand. I told my story, about the cottage, about my father, about the inheritance, about the letter, about the life insurance policy, about the betrayal. I told the judge the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And when I was done, a wave of relief washed over me. I had done my part. Now it was up to the judge. The judge's ruling was about to decide my future, my life, my home. It was about to decide the fate of my sister. I was ready. The judge sat in silence, his face unreadable. He had heard both sides. He had seen the evidence. He had heard the truth. He had seen the way Maribel had lied, the way she had tried to cover up her deception. He had seen the way she had tried to destroy me. He was about to decide my future, my life, my home. I looked at Maribel, at her smug, confident face. She was a predator, a monster who had tried to devour me, but I was a fighter. I was a survivor. I was a woman who had fought for her life, for her dignity, for her future. The judge cleared his throat. The courtroom was silent. I have heard both sides, he said, his voice a low, authoritative rumble. I have seen the evidence. I have heard the testimony. I have come to a decision. My heart was pounding in my chest. I couldn't breathe. I was on the verge of a breakdown, on the verge of a panic attack. I just wanted it to be over. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Neoma, he said. The words were a shock, a sudden stunning blow that hit me with the force of a tidal wave. I had won. I had won. I had won. I looked at Jareth, and he was smiling. A wide, triumphant grin. He had been right. We had done it. We had won. I looked at Marble, and her face was a mask of shock, of disbelief, of a raw, ugly rage. She had lost. She had lost everything. The judge went on, his voice a drone in my ears. He was talking about the inheritance, about the trust, about the life insurance policy. He was talking about the fact that the money had been a trust fund that was supposed to be shared equally between me and Marble. He was talking about the fact that Marble had used a loophole, a legal technicality, to take the money for herself. He was talking about the fact that she had committed fraud, that she had lied, that she had deceived me. He was talking about a punishment that would change her life forever. The judge ordered Marble to give me the cottage back, to give me the money from the life insurance policy, and to pay for my legal fees. He also ordered her to pay a fine, a large, staggering fine, a fine that would cripple her, that would destroy her. He also ordered her to face a full investigation by the authorities. She had committed fraud. She had lied. She had deceived me. She was going to pay. She was going to pay for what she had done. I looked at her tear-streaked face, at her broken spirit. She was no longer a monster, a predator. She was just a woman who had lost everything, a woman who had lost her way. I felt a pang of pity, a pang of sadness. I had won, but I had lost my sister. I had lost the girl I had known, the girl I had loved, and I was about to lose her again, in a way that would be even more painful than before. I went home to the cottage and I opened the door. The smell of damp earth and old books filled my lungs. It was a familiar, comforting smell, a smell that felt like home. I sat down on the floor, the floorboards cold against my skin, and I let the tears come. I cried for my father, for his love, for his foresight. I cried for the loss of the cottage, for the loss of my home, for the loss of my life. I cried for the loss of my sister, for the girl she used to be, for the woman she was becoming. The past few months had been a nightmare, a living hell, but I had survived. I had fought. I had won, but I had lost. I had lost my sister, the person I had loved most in the world. I was alone again, alone in the world, alone in the cottage. The silence was deafening, a silence that was filled with my grief, with my despair, with my pain. I was about to find out how much more I would have to lose. The truth was about to come out, and it would change everything. The news spread like wildfire. The story of the sisters, the inheritance, the betrayal, it was a tale that captured the imagination of the city. The local news stations, the newspapers, the social media pages, they all had the story. Maribel, once a local celebrity, was now a pariah. Her friends, her new friends, the people with names like Cassidy and Lowell, had abandoned her. The mansion, once a symbol of her wealth, was now a monument to her greed, a testament to her downfall. Her business ventures had fallen apart. The people who had invested in her, the people who had trusted her, were now suing her. She was a woman who was on the verge of losing everything, woman who had nothing, a woman who had no one. I was a hero, a symbol of hope, a woman who had fought for her life, for her dignity, for her future. But I didn't feel like a hero. I felt empty. I felt alone. I had won the battle, but I had lost the war. I had the cottage back. It was in the same state as when I had left it. The peeling paint, the creaking floors, the smell of damp earth and old books. It was a monument to my grief, to my pain, to my loss. I spent my days patching the roof, pulling weeds from the garden, and trying to forget. But I couldn't forget. The memories were a constant, heavy weight, a constant, heavy reminder of what I had lost. I had a small fortune from the life insurance policy, enough to live on for the rest of my life, but I didn't want the money. I didn't want the money that had caused so much pain. I wanted my sister back. I wanted my life back. I wanted a life that was simple, a life that was filled with a sense of peace, a life that was filled with a sense of love. I had to do something. I had to find a way to get my life back, to get my sister back, to get my family back. I had been so focused on winning, on fighting, on proving her wrong, that I had forgotten what I was fighting for. I wasn't fighting for the money, I wasn't fighting for the cottage, I was fighting for us. I was fighting for the bond we had shared, the bond that had been broken, the bond that I wanted to heal. The betrayal had been a monster, a cold, cruel monster that had consumed my sister, that had tried to consume me, but I had to fight it. I had to find a way to save her, to save us. I had to find a way to get my sister back. I was a woman who was alone in the world, a woman who had no family, a woman who had no home, but I was also a woman who was a fighter, a woman who was a survivor. I had to do something. I had to find a way to make her see the truth, to make her see what she had done. I had to find a way to make her see that she was not a monster, that she was just a woman who had lost her way. I had to do something that would show her that I had not given up on her, that I had not abandoned her. I had to do something that would show her that I still loved her. I had to find a way to show her that she was still my sister. I made a phone call that would change everything. I called Lyle, her lawyer, the man who had helped her in her deception, the man who had helped her in her crime. I told him I wanted to meet with her. I told him I wanted to talk to her, to look her in the eye, to talk to her without lawyers, without judges, without witnesses. He was quiet for a long moment. He said he would call me back. I hung up the phone, and I waited. I was so nervous, so scared. I didn't know what would happen, but I knew I had to do this. I had to do this for us. I had to do this for me. I had to find a way to heal. I had to find a way to forgive. I had to find a way to move on. I was about to find out if she was willing to do the same. Lyle called me back a few minutes later. He said Maribel had agreed to meet me. She was at a diner, a small, unassuming diner with red vinyl booths, and a jukebox that played old country songs. The same diner where Jareth and I had gone the day I had gotten the eviction notice. I got in my car and I drove to the diner, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The drive was a blur, a haze of color and sound. I was so nervous, so scared. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if she would be angry, if she would be filled with rage, if she would be filled with a quiet contempt. I walked into the diner and I saw her. She was sitting in a booth in the back, the same booth where I had sat. Her hair was a mess, her clothes were rumpled, and her face was a mask of despair. She looked like a woman who had been through a war, a woman who had lost everything. She looked at me, and her eyes were filled with a raw, ugly desperation that made my stomach clench. She wasn't the same person who had laughed in my face just a few months ago. She was a different person, a broken person, a person who had been humbled by her greed. I sat down across from her, and the silence was deafening. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I just looked at her tear-streaked face, at her broken spirit. She was a monster, a cold, cruel monster who had taken everything from me. But she was also my sister, the girl I had loved, the girl I had grown up with. She was a part of me, a part of my past, a part of my future. I had to do something. I had to say something. I had to find a way to heal. Maribel, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Why? She looked at me, and her eyes were filled with a deep, dark sadness. I don't know, she said, her voice shaking. I lost my way. The money was too much. It was too much to handle. I thought it would make me happy. I thought it would make me a better person. But it made me a monster. The words were a confession, a testament to her pain, to her sorrow, to her regret. I looked at her, and I saw a glimpse of the old Maribel, the girl I had known, the girl I had loved, and I knew what I had to do. I had to forgive her. I had to forgive her, not for her but for me. I had to forgive her so I could move on, so I could heal, so I could live. I reached across the table and I took her hand. Her hand was cold, her fingers were trembling. I forgive you, I said, my voice filled with a deep, aching love. I forgive you. Let's go home. We walked out of the diner and into the rainy night, a silent pair of sisters who had gone through a war and had come out on the other side. We got in my car and I drove her to the cottage, the engine rumbling with a low, comforting vibration. When we got there, I opened the door and the smell of damp earth and old books filled our lungs. It was a familiar, comforting smell, a smell that felt like home. The cottage was no longer a monument to my pain, to my loss. It was a monument to my love, to my forgiveness, to my healing. It was a monument to the fact that we were sisters, that we were a family, that we were home. Maribel looked at me, her eyes filled with tears, her face a mask of gratitude, of a raw, ugly hope. Neoma, she said, her voice a low murmur. Thank you for not giving up on me. I just smiled. The cottage was a sanctuary, a place where we could heal, where we could grow, where we could become whole again. It was a place where we could be a family again. It was a place where we could be home.